Hello dear friends, Assalamu alaikum and welcome back to our lesson for you. Dear friends, as you know that we are discussing about the structure of ribosome, right? So we have recorded about 2 videos regarding ribosome. In the first video we just introduced ribosome, what is ribosome and everything about ribosome, and then we discussed about the parts of ribosome. And now as I had told you that we will discuss about the chemical composition of ribosome. So let's know about the chemical composition of ribosome. Right, let me write here chemical composition. Chemically, you know that ribosome is made up of 2 important factors, right? As you know, here we had told you that ribosome is chemically made up of 2 important factors. The first one is proteins, right? And the second one, the most important thing, that is RNA, ribonucleic acid. And which RNA? The ribosomal RNA. So we put a very small r here, that's why, because we want to mention that this RNA which we are talking about is present in ribosome. As you know, I had told you that we have 3 types of RNAs in our cell. The first one is ribosomal RNA, transfer RNA and messenger RNA. So we have 3 types of RNAs and we put R here to show that this RNA which we are talking about is present in ribosome. Done. So ribosome is chemically composed of these 2 important factors, the proteins and the RNA. Right, let's jump into the chemical composition, the real chemical composition of ribosome. Okay, so look here. You know that we have 2 types of RNAs, the prokaryotic cell RNA and the eukaryotic cell RNA. And so it means that we have 80S RNA and 70S RNA. So first of all, let me talk about the chemical composition of 70S RNA, that is the RNA of a prokaryotic cell ribosome. Prokaryotic cell ribosome. Done. So you know that in the prokaryotic cell we have 70S ribosome. Done. And this 70S, you know that we have one large subunit and one small subunit. Done. Other than this, you know that in this RNA is made up of protein and RNA, right? This ribosome is made up of protein and RNA. So what is the percentage of proteins? We should know this. And what is the percentage of RNA? We should also know this. So in a 70S ribosome, the percentage of protein we should know as 60 to 65%. It is made up of protein, and 35 to 40% it is made up of RNA. Done. This is the general composition. The RNA, the ribosome, which is 70S, it is made up of protein and RNA, and the protein percentage in 70S ribosome is 60 to 65%, and the RNA percentage in 70S ribosome is 35 to 40%. So it means, very simple words, it means that the 70S ribosome contains 60 to 65% proteins and 35 to 40% RNA, right? And we also know that if we make here a very simple ribosome, this is its small subunit and here is its large subunit, right? So we know that this large subunit of 70S ribosome is 50S and this small subunit is 30S, right? And you should know that this 30S must also contain protein, and this 50S should also contain protein, right? And we should know that this 30S must also contain RNA and this 50S must also contain RNA. right? So we have divided these here. Now let's know about the RNA of 30S and RNA of 50S ribosome. Let's go into it. So first we should discuss about large subunit, right, which is this 50th. Okay, in a 70S ribosome, the large subunit is 50S, we know that, and this 50S must contain proteins and RNA, right? Okay, there are two types of RNA present in this 50S large subunit of ribosome. Then how many types of RNA? Two types of RNAs, and these are the 23S and the 5S. The 23S and the 5S RNA, right? So look carefully, I'm making it simple. In a 70S ribosome, right, it must contain a large subunit, and in this large subunit there must be RNA. In this large subunit of the 70S ribosome, there are two types of RNAs, the 23S and the 5S. It's so simple now. And it also contains proteins, right? So how many peptide bonds, peptide chains are present which will make those proteins? It's so simple. So there are 34 peptide chains, we say. How many? 34 peptides. Right. It's so simple now. Look carefully. We know that RNA ribosome is made up of protein and RNA. So look here, protein and RNA. And we are talking about the composition of 70S ribosome, right? So 70S ribosome is made up of how many units? Two units, the large subunit and the small subunit. The large subunit is 50S. Inside this 50S there must be RNA and proteins. So there in the 50S ribosome, large subunit, there are two types of RNAs formed, right? The 23 Swedberg RNA and the 5S RNA. It's so simple. And the proteins, how many peptide bonds, peptides are present there? So there are 34 peptides present in the 50S ribosome. Done. Then let's move further forward and say about the small subunit. Small subunit. It's clear. So the small subunit of a 70S RNA and ribosome is, you know that there is 30S, right? And you know that inside this 30S there must be RNA and there must be protein, right? So here is only one type of RNA present, and that is 16S RNA. Yes, we know that. That is 16S, right? And the peptides are, how many peptides are present there? There are about 21 peptides are present here. So let me use the same color which I have put there. 21 peptides. It's quite clear now. Done. So this is the composition of large subunit of 70S ribosome, and this is the composition of small subunit of 70S ribosome. Once again, let's repeat it fast. The large subunit of a 50S ribosome contains RNA and protein. The protein contains 34 peptides, and the RNAs are of two types, the 23S and the 5S, right? And here in the small subunit there are 16S RNA, and how many proteins, peptides are present here? 21 peptides are present here. Let's make it a little bit complicated but very simple. Look carefully, friends. You know that RNA is made up of nucleotides. RNA is made up of nucleotides. What is this? Nucleotide. This is also nucleotide, right? And this is a long chain of it, and this long chain of it is called RNA, right? So if you are talking about RNA, right, you mean that you are talking about nucleotides, right? The RNA must contain nucleotides, right? So this 23S RNA which we are talking about, how many nucleotides will be present in this RNA? Right, number of nucleotides. And here in case of 5S RNA, what will be the number of nucleotides? And here in case of 16S RNA, what will be the number of nucleotides? Right? Now, I want to give you more and more knowledge. I don't want to hide anything from you guys. Look carefully once again. If we have 23S RNA, and you know that RNA is made up of small subunits and these are called nucleotides, right? In this RNA, in this 23S RNA, how many nucleotides are combined to make this 23S RNA? I'm talking about that, right? Okay, so let's write the detail of it here. Look, in case of 23S RNA, right, we should mention two important things. What is the number of nucleotides? And if we weight these nucleotides, that RNA, what will be the weight of that nucleotide? That's so simple, right? So in 23S RNA, how many nucleotides are present? There are 3,200 nucleotides are present there, right? In 23S RNA, once again I'm telling you, what is the number of nucleotides? How many nucleotides combine and make this 23S RNA? So there are 3,200 nucleotides, right? And if you make the molecular mass or the molecular weight of those all nucleotides, what will be that? That will be about 1.2 into 10 raised to the power 6 Dalton or Dalton. Right? So this is a very small unit, right, which we use to measure the molecular weight of substances, right? So look, the 23S RNA is made up of 3,200 nucleotides, and if we weigh all those nucleotides, that will be 1.2 into 10 raised to the power 6 Dalton. Done. And what about 5S RNA? Look, so the 5S RNA must contain number of nucleotides, and the 5S RNA we know that contains 120 nucleotides, right? And what will be the mass or the weight of those nucleotides? That is 3.2 into 10 raised to the power 6 Dalton. Done. This is the weight of those nucleotides. Look carefully once again. Here are 3,200 nucleotides, and in 5S RNA, the number of nucleotides which we counted were 120. That's so simple. Let's come here. 16S RNA. 16S RNA contain 1600 nucleotides. 1600 nucleotides. And what is the molecular weight of all those nucleotides which will we bring? That is about 0.6 into 10 raised to the power 6 Dalton. Done. This is the molecular weight of the how many nucleotides? 1600 nucleotides. Clear, friends? Done. So this was about the composition of 70S ribosome. Once again, let's repeat it. The 70S ribosome is made up of proteins and RNA. This 70S ribosome contains the large subunit and the small subunit. The large subunit must contain RNA and protein. The small subunit must contain RNA and protein. So the RNA of the large subunit, there are two types of RNAs, the 23S RNA and the 5S RNA, right? And here 34 peptides are present. In the small subunit, the RNA 16S and 21 peptides are present there, right? And if we find the detail of them, the 23S RNA will contain 3200 nucleotides, and the molecular weight of that will be this. And the 5' RNA will contain 120 nucleotides, and this will be the weight. And the 16' RNA must contain 1600 nucleotides, and this is the molecular weight, right? In the next lecture we will discuss about the chemical composition of ATS ribosome. See you there.